Awesome, I think it worked. So hi everyone, my name is Rachel Verschell. I'm with the NASA Disasters Response Coordination System. I may have met some of you, let's see, requesting allow recording, sorry about that. I may have met some of you at the regional conference a month or two ago with my colleague Tim. We had a booth there. So excited to present on the DRCS. If you hear me use that acronym, that's what that stands for, Disasters Response Coordination System. I'm based at Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. I'm also a contractor, so that's why I'm able to be here and present during the government shutdown. My colleague Tim Wilmers, unfortunately, is a government employee, so he could not help me present today. So I am actually going to turn off my camera while I go through my slides, and then I'll turn it back on at the end for questions. Feel free to raise your hand if you want to interrupt me during the presentation. Otherwise, we can take questions at the end. So I'm going to turn off my camera. Awesome. All right. So just a quick introduction of the DRCS. So this is a map of the US, obviously, and there are some NASA centers spread throughout. So like I mentioned, I'm at Goddard Space Flight Center in Maryland. The Disasters Program is a program under NASA's Earth Science Division at NASA headquarters. And the Disasters Program, you know, we do research and applications across a variety different areas of the disaster cycle, but the DRCS focuses on the response side of things. So the Disasters Response Coordination System, we leverage a one NASA approach, so that's why this map is here with all of the NASA centers. We spread across all of these NASA centers that are on that map. The headquarters of the Disaster Response Coordination System is on the red dot at Langley Research Center in Virginia. But we have people spread throughout all of the NASA centers here to be able to connect with the scientists and get the best available science in the hands of people to help support disaster response. And we are request driven, so this means our team, we activate to support disaster response, but only when we receive a request from an end user. So we don't respond to every disaster, but if we receive a request, and I'll go through that screening, the process of our activations shortly, but that is when we decide if we can support the request or not. So this is another overview of our mission and purpose, but on the right you see a graph. So again, the DRCS project office in the middle here, that is based at Langley. And then again, it's under the larger disasters program here at the top. But each of those NASA centers have people like myself at Goddard and Tim, who's not with us today, but two of us, we're called Center Response Coordinators. Each NASA center here has two people at each center that connect with the scientists at their center that can support disaster response. So NASA's always doing research and different, they're taking satellite data and they're doing different research and applications from it. So our job is to connect with those scientists, understand what new research they might have come up with that could support disaster response. So that's a way that we make sure we're always understanding what new information might be out there, a new capability that could support. So that is how we kind of connect with all those scientists. So we really want to enable the response community to help reduce disaster impacts. So we provide different information. Ideally, it's timely, actionable, and accurate information to support the response community. And again, everything I'm showing today, it's all free and open. So there's no cost associated with any of this. This data is available for anyone to use. So the reason I'm here today, actually, so Goddard Space Flight Center in the little yellow color on the right, we are technically located in the blue in Maryland, but we were assigned FEMA regions 1 and 2. This is a way that we kind of divided up the United States so that we could make sure we have outreach to different state, local, regional response, emergency response, organizations to make sure that everyone knows this is a tool available for anyone to access. So we've used the FEMA regions to split up again amongst the center response coordinators at each center so that we're reaching out, we're doing these presentations, we're just getting the word out that this is something that you guys can utilize. So that is why I'm here. I'm here to connect with this region. That's why we were at the Region 2 IAEM conference, and we're hoping to go to the national conference coming up in November as well. So we formally started the DRCS in June 2024, although we've been responding to disasters since I think 2017, but we formalized this in 2024. So this is our first year, just some stats of what we've activated for. So we had 16 different activations throughout the year. We had 24 screenings, which means somebody requested support and we, for some reason, decided not to support. And I'll go through, some of those reasons why we might not actually activate after screening. We had 38 unique requesters. So FEMA was our #1 requester. They requested support for 8 different events. We also have nonprofits that request some support, some international partners as well. So again, it spans a bunch of different types of requesters, and we can have multiple requesters for each event. Let's say there's a big hurricane coming up. For Hurricane Ian, for example, we had more than just FEMA as a requester. We had state organizations, nonprofits, etc., all for the same event. So our average activation length is about 15 days. So we try to just support during disaster response and not as much into the recovery phase, since we are created to support responses. And then geographically, we do activate for international events, not as many this first year, but over about 4 different countries and 16 US states. And then, we'll support different hazards, but this last year we supported mostly floods and hurricanes with the majority of the requests and hazards. And then landslides is pretty common, since that's often, a secondary hazard once there's flooding and rainfall or an earthquake. And then activation levels on the bottom right, we try to go by FEMA levels. So the majority of our activations have been level 3. So this is, hopefully this video plays. This is just looking at all of the different NASA satellites that are out there looking down at the Earth that we could take the data from and provide an actionable product for the users. So there's a bunch of satellites up there. They're always going around the Earth, looking down and taking that data that we can then process and potentially make a product from. So there's a lot going on up there. And with that, there's a bunch of different products that we can make. I've been talking about these products. So here's a few examples. So we take the data from satellites and we either provide it as the raw data itself as an imagery, or we do an analysis on top of it that will provide additional information. So on the left, this is power. You can assess power status or power outage status from nighttime imagery. So this is an example of a daily product every single night around 1 a.m. I believe this satellite takes a picture, and this is global. So this product is available every single day globally, and it looks at the luminosity on the ground at night. So we can take this product and we can look at the difference before and after an event of any type and look at power outages. So that's really useful, especially for looking into recovery, as looking as responses occurring day to day. Are the lights coming back on? Is there a community that still doesn't have lights that might need more support? And then on the right, here's an example of taking imagery and doing some math and looking at vegetation change before and after an event. I'm going to admit someone to the room. So this is really useful to look at different change to the vegetation on the ground that might indicate there might have been flooding there or a tornado passed through, for example. And then the bottom left, we have ability to detect floods. So we have a lot of different products that can help detect flood. So trying to pull out the difference between, there's water that's always existing there, and then there's flood waters, and there might be flooded vegetation, there might be flooded agricultural fields or flooded urban areas. So we have some products that can help detect floodwaters that way. And then on the right, there's just an example of mapping landslides. So I'm actually on the NASA Goddard landslide team. So I do map landslides often to support disaster responses. This is an example of a heat map, which I think this was for Helene. We didn't have optical imagery that did not have clouds covering. So we created this heat map from synthetic aperture radar, which I will talk about a little bit more detail, but that can see through clouds, and we can look at change in the slope and a few other things that we can help determine where landslides may be congregating. So this is trying to get some information in the hands of people before they might have a full view of what might be going on the ground. So just the activation process. So who can request an activation of the DRCS? This is basically anybody supporting disaster response. So it includes federal, state, tribal, territorial, or any other local government entity. Again, I mentioned the international level. We can support that as well. Nonprofit organizations and units, again, of international governments. And just to highlight that we don't require a presidential disaster declaration. So we can activate without a disaster declaration. And then how to request an activation, all you have to do is email that email there, drcs@nasa.gov, to request support. And then ideally you put in as much information as you can about what you need. That way we can better screen and determine if we can support the request. So ideally you can put your area of interest, what is your response question, and I'll go over some of those shortly. And then products or expertise required. Was it a flood event? You want to know where the water was. You want to know where the damage is, where the landslides are, things like that. And then the time frame that you need the product. So do you need this as soon as possible? Do you need this as early next week? What does the timeline look like? So from that, we'll start determining if we can activate or not. So that's the screening process, the second thing here. So we'll determine that based on the capacity of our team. Are we already activated for another event where it's taking up a lot of our team's time? That would be a reason why we might not be able to support a second activation, or just looking at when the satellites might overpass that area of interest. It might be 6 days later and you guys need the product immediately. So we would determine, the satellite is not, we don't have any helpful data that will be there when you need it. So we'll kind of go back and forth with the requester and determine if we're able to support or not. And this goes through the timeline a little bit if we do activate. So then it takes us to the second thing here. So you request the data. It takes hours to days for us to determine to activate. I only say days here because if your request to activate on a Friday afternoon, we're non-operational. We don't work nights and weekends typically. So it might take us till Monday to determine if we can activate. So then we assemble data products. So that can take anywhere from 1 to 6 days on average. Again, that depends on when the satellite overpasses the region that we're interested in. And then we have to download the data, process it into different products, and then package it up, nice little present here, and put it on our disasters portal, which is right here. We publish it to our portal. This is an open portal. I'll talk about it shortly. So all that data is available for anyone to view and download. Well, we'll talk about the access points shortly. After we publish some data to the portal, we will iterate with the requester. Did we provide what they needed? Are there more questions that we can support? If so, we'll conduct a new analysis. So we'll continue to be activated until we've fulfilled all requests. If there's no more new requests, then we'll deactivate. And that's when we do an after action assessment to determine how the process went, try to better ourselves for the next activation. And ideally, we receive feedback from people that we supported. What did they think about the activation? Did we support? How was the data? Getting that feedback really helps us better for next time. All right, so some example questions. So I talked about having the question in your request of what you need support for. So there's a few different examples of some questions. So if you want to know, for example, where do power outages persist and which communities may be affected, from that question, we'll know that the nighttime lights product that I talked about would be useful. If you ask where impacts or damage occurs, we have some different change products that can make damage maps. If you ask where the landslides occurred, that's when either I will manually digitize all these landslides over the region, if there's clear imagery that I can do that with, or we have some AI models that can also automatically map some landslides. If you just need situational awareness, just to visualize what's going on, we can just post imagery. So this is an example of optical imagery. It needs to be cloud free so that you can actually see what's going on the ground. We can take that imagery, we can do different band combinations with the data and pull out, for example, this red image where floodwaters really pop a lot more clearly than a true color image. So we can do a few different band combinations for that. Or if you ask, what area was affected, how severe was the hazard, we have a few different products on floodwater, flood extent. For example, this is a burned area product here for the California wildfires. This is showing the severity of the burn scar. So not just where the fire was, but how severe it was in certain areas. So these are just some examples of some questions you could ask. And just quickly to go over some different myths about remote sensing and disasters. These are common myths that we hear often. So just to go over some different things about remote sensing. So one of the myths is that satellites are always up there. So the imagery should be available within 24 hours. So that is a myth because satellites, while they are up there, they follow a stable track. So it really, you can look ahead and see when can I expect this satellite to pass my area because they are on a stable track, they have a schedule, but it could be days before they pass over the area you need. So for example, with the Texas flash flooding, since it's flash flooding, the water was there and left pretty quickly. We did not have a satellite, one of the NASA satellites, they did not pass over while there was flood water on the ground. So it really depends on the schedule. Sometimes it times really well and happens to be a satellite pass right when you need it, but you have to kind of take a look at the schedule. The other myth is that satellite data looks like Google Earth, where you can see trees and power lines and mailboxes. So the reality is Google Earth combines satellite data and aerial imagery. So from flown by a plane, you can get higher resolution data from that. Often our data, they're a lot coarser resolution than that. So you won't see that much detail, especially since it's satellite data, it's a lot further away than what Google Earth uses. And then the last myth is that satellites can capture images of the whole impacted area. And again, that's dependent on the scope of view. So you could have a swath, that the satellite passes and takes a picture of the Earth. It could cut an area right in half, and then you have to wait till the satellite passes the next, basically the next time it passes, it might capture a different area. So it might cut your region right in half. It really just depends on when it passes and where the field of view is. So those are just a few myths about satellite data, remote sensing for disasters. And then I'm going to go over just the most common types of data that we use. So this is multispectral imagery. So in this example here, it's showing for different. You can use it for damage, landslides, and flood detection. I call this is also called optical imagery. So that's where you see from takes a picture of the ground and it looks like a picture you would take from a plane looking down at the Earth. That's where if there is a cloud, it will obscure the view. You won't be able to see below the cloud. So that is a negative. You might get a Landsat 8 or 9 or Sentinel-2 pass at your area of interest at the right time, but it's a really cloudy day, so you can't use the data. So that is the negative. It is 10 meters to 30 meters in spatial resolution, depending on what satellite it comes from. So that's where you can start to see how much detail you'll be able to see on the ground. So 10 meters, you can see more detail on the ground than 30 meters. So in the middle, it shows this, the top one is a true color. Again, this is what you see from your eye. This is what we're used to seeing things. And then you can do different band combinations to make floodwaters pop, damage to agriculture pop. It's not what you're used to seeing. You're not used to seeing these bright greens or bright red colors, but it's a way to train the eye to focus on areas of damage. And then from that, we can actually do an additional analysis where we can provide like a polygon or a raster, which is a format from GIS that you can pull out that change. So instead of just for you looking and scrolling around this area, we could do an analysis where we can highlight in yellow all of the change for you. So for example, normalized different vegetation index, NDVI, literally just looking at change of the vegetation before and after an event. That can help identify possible damage, or we have another one, it's a wetness index where we can detect flooding. And then we also have down here, this is showing the landslides that I've manually mapped. So just looking before and after at the imagery, I can see these little lines on the slopes, which I can map as landslides. So then there's synthetic aperture radar, or SAR. I know that's confusing because I know search and rescue you guys also call SAR, but this is synthetic aperture radar. I mentioned it earlier. This can see through clouds. So here's a video here of as it's passing over, it's imaging the ground through microwave frequency that, again, can see through those clouds, which is really helpful when, there's a hurricane sitting over an area. dumping rain and it's flooding. If we have a synthetic aperture radar satellite pass over, take an image, we can then do a lot of different products, create a lot of products that can show what's going on under those clouds. So again, for synthetic aperture radar, we have Sentinel-1 from European Space Agency. We also have NISAR that just launched. It's a new satellite. So that will be providing a lot more data. So we can take the raw data here, and there's some crazy colors here, but from that we can actually detect flood and damage and landslide heat map, for example, that I talked about earlier. So it shows differences in topology. It can identify inundation. So while the clouds are still sitting there, you can get some information on the ground. So it's pretty useful. And like I mentioned, we have a mapping portal. So this portal is where you can find all of this data I've been talking about. So it's maps.disasters.nasa.gov, or you can scan the QR code there. It's important to note that we're undergoing a migration to a new platform right now. So currently this link has a little bit less things than we used to have on here. Sorry about if you guys can hear my computer dinging. So it's going through a transformation, so some of the services might not be working, but we are going to continue to update that, and I'll talk about that shortly. So on the red banner, when you first go to this link, you'll see a red banner. If we are activated, that's where you will find all the information from an activation. So for example, if you did not request an activation, but we could have gotten a request from somebody else, we could be producing data. The first thing you want to do is go to our homepage. Oh, look, we're already activated. You can access all of the data without submitting a request. Now, we like to know who's using the data, so it would be nice if you emailed us just so we know that, hey, our data is being used by somebody else as well, but you don't have to. If the data is online, if we have an activation page, then you can download, or we can access that data. And then down a little bit further, we have some dashboards that pull together different services that you can visualize at different times. And then as you keep scrolling, we have recent events. So it shows what we've activated for the most recently. You can click on these and see what types of products we've created. And then we have our near real-time products at the bottom, or at the top, you can click near real-time data, and I'll go over what that looks like shortly. So if you click on an event, this is what it will look like. So it'll pop up a page like this that has a bunch of different products and web maps and image services that we've created with different data products for this event. So again, these are products that we produced for this event specifically, and then we also put near real-time products on here. Again, those near real-time products, I'll go over that in a minute, but satellites are passing every day, twice a day, every week, depending on satellite, and these data sets are always being produced. So the nighttime lights data that I mentioned, that is always going on. You don't need to activate our team to get that data. You can always download that or take a look at it. So again, this is available through ArcGIS Online. It's openly available. You don't have to log in. Each service will have REST service. So basically you can copy the link and pull it into your own service. If you have a website or a web map, you can pull in the services. And then there's a WMS service available. That basically means you don't have to use Esri. It's an open source. You can use different software if you'd like. And then for directly downloading the data, you just have to contact our team. And I'll show the email at the end of the PowerPoint as well. And then we can pass the data to you directly. That way you can work with it offline. And then we also allow portal-to-portal connections with partners to immediately streamline the data delivery and to remove that barrier of entry. So if you were to click on one of these, let's say you click on this Opera product at the very top, you will get a product page that looks similar to this. So it has a lot of information on here. We have a bunch of metadata in the description. So it'll talk about the dates of the images that might be in this product, a summary, short, ideally it's short and try to be high level. And then we have a suggested use section and any caveats of how you should be using the data, what the colors might mean. Try to keep it simple and clear of what this product should be used for and if there's anything you shouldn't be using this product for. And then going through to the satellite and the sensor, if you scroll down, it has resolution of the data, different credits. And if there's a point of contact, if you have more questions, it can give the contact of the scientist. And then any additional links. So from here, you would open it up in Map Viewer if you want to visualize the data, scroll around in it. If you want to pull it into your own system, at the very bottom, they'll have a service URL here. And again, that WMS endpoint that I mentioned for any open source access. All right, and then I mentioned there's near real-time products. So these are always being produced. So it's global coverage unless it says CONUS. If it says otherwise, it's not global coverage, but otherwise it is. Now this data, since it's always being produced, it's coarser resolution than what I've talked about before. It could be 500 meters, it could be a kilometer, for example. So the negative is that it's coarser resolution. You don't see as much detail on the ground, but at least it is occurring more frequently. So you'll get that information at a higher rate. So again, depends on the product, but it can update every few hours, sometimes daily, sometimes weekly. It depends on the product. So for example, that black marble nighttime lights, like I mentioned, that's daily. So every single day you can look back at what the nighttime lights look like last night. The precipitation rate, that's every 30 minutes globally. And then there's some imagery here. It's again, like the true color imagery, what your eyes can see on the ground, that's daily, but it's coarser resolution. Like I mentioned, there's some air quality ones like tempo. And then we also have fire perimeters. That's every 12 hours. So there's a link here and we'll share the PDF with the group so you can access some of these links. So like I mentioned, the portal is being migrated to a new platform. So again, it's still going to be open access. It's going to connect all the different disaster program partnerships and products, training. It will have trainings on there and different tools. It's just moving to a cloud-based environment, so I won't get into the nitty-gritty there, but we are in the process of doing that right now. So the goals of the new platform is to increase the reliability of access, so there won't be any days where the portal is down for maintenance, for example. We want to be able to support scalability and broaden the scope of what our portal does. And then not just response, but we want to expand into different categories. So disaster risk, resilience, and recovery as well. So right now we're working on our beta release of the platform, and then the full release will be in October 2026 estimated. And if you guys would like to get involved in supporting, thinking through what this new portal looks like, we will have a stakeholder workshop, and that's going to be planned after this October 2025 release of the beta portal. So there's an email here. Again, we'll share out the slides, but you can email Ronan if you're interested in participating in the stakeholder workshop. I think that will be in the beginning of next year. And then also, if this was overwhelming, there's a bunch of NASA resources to help learn remote sensing. So it's called RSET, the Applied Remote Sensing Training Program. There's a link here. There's a ton of different trainings. If you want to learn more about synthetic aperture radar, like I mentioned today, there's a training on that. You can look at, remote sensing for flood specifically, for drought specifically, for, there's a bunch of different training available, and it's all free. All right, so just to recap, again, we can provide imagery, hazard maps, different analysis on top of imagery to support response. To request, you just email drcs@nasa.gov, and then we will screen and determine if we can activate to support. And then all the data is publicly available on our portal. And I believe that is my last slide. So there's my email. I also put Tim's email on here. Again, he is not able to work during the shutdown, but he is the other center response coordinator that is assigned FEMA regions 1 and 2. So we are your go-to for any questions. Our job is a coordinator. So if you have questions about a specific product, we can help connect you to that scientist to answer your questions if we don't know the answer. If you want to activate, or if you have a request for disaster support, you can email, again, this DRCS email, or you can email Tim and I, and we can connect you that way. So I will pause there and open it up for any questions. And I will turn on my camera again. Yes, Michael.
Oh, thanks, Rachel.
Of course.
I'll jump right in. A couple of quick things. I'm assuming for the Goddard support for Region 2, besides Puerto Rico, it's also the U.S. Virgin Islands, correct?
Yes.
Okay, just a quick update, probably for helpful us. I'm assuming probably it's the same passes on the satellites. Those two are so close together. that there's not a
Yeah,
differentiation between them. Um,
yeah, I would say it depends on the satellite, for how wide the picture is when it passes over. It could have bad luck one time and just cut it in half, but you can look at each satellite should have like an orbit schedule, and it will show where it's going to pass and when it's going to pass, and you can say, oh, it cuts my island in half. That's bad luck, but for the most part, I would say should cover that area.
Gotcha. And does Region 2 have, as you know, as an example, and we're in Region 2, so it makes sense we're asking those questions. But does
Mhm.
the FEMA Region 2 have a sort of a standing checklist to activate you guys as part of a, something that occurs,
Mhm.
or any other regions, that sort of thing, sort of a, hey, let's start this DRCS process?
I'm not sure if they have a checklist, but I do know we often get invited to their daily calls when they activate. So we keep kind of an awareness of what's going on, where are the pain points, what do they need, the data gaps. So we often join their calls. But I'm not sure what they use to decide to email us to say, hey, I guess if they have a data gap and they say, hey, NASA could fill this gap, let's email them. That's
Okay.
probably what they go by. Like if they have it handled and they don't need the larger view from satellites, or if they already have that connection, other agencies have satellites, maybe they don't need to activate us. But yeah, I would say a data gap is probably what they use to determine.
And I'll hit a couple more round robin kind of questions. The nighttime lights I'm fascinated by. Are
Yeah, it's
you
cool.
doing any work with Department of Energy's Eagle Eye program to try to merge those two together? Their data is the actual from the power companies, utilities, et
Mhm.
cetera. It would be fascinating to see your data together there as a cross validation. This area reports that they have these power back on, but guess what? The lights are not showing up.
Yeah, so I don't know if we have any current project to work on that, but I am aware of Eagle Eye, and I feel like it could be useful to compare them, especially, the satellite's just taking a picture every day. There could be cloud cover, there could be other things that maybe make it look like there's not an outage when Eagle Eye is reporting an outage. I would say if the area that you live in reports their outages accurately, then that's what you should be using, but you could look at the satellite paths to help validate that. I think there might be some discrepancies with reporting, and maybe, it's not all reported. So this is where you can use that satellite data. But I mean, it's a good idea to work to merge those
I'll
products.
I'll
Yeah.
find a connection that I have for DOE, and
Yeah.
I'll connect you guys just to see if that's something that maybe there's a little machine learning in the background that can kind of go, with a 30% certainty we think this is this, or what, the
Hmm.
90% certainty we think this is this.
Yeah, that'd be
Challenges
good.
like my concerns are that, for example, with Puerto Rico and Virgin Islands,
Hmm.
you have government controlled entities, and so to some
Yeah.
extent, point being is that it's all or nothing kind of a thing for them. There's only one source to validate, and if they don't get that data, how do you cross validate that it's really working? That this
Hmm.
substation in this municipality or this one island has what it says it's supposed to have. It'd be nice to sort of do something to
Yeah.
check that. Um,
Yeah, for sure.
are you doing anything similar working with the Red Cross? I mean, I'm wondering, they do damage assessment
Hmm.
that would significantly benefit. Does the name Greg Toon or Casey Richards ring a bell?
Those names don't to me, but I know we have worked in support of the Red Cross before. We probably have different connections.
Okay.
But any of that, like on the ground, if someone's doing damage collection and they have points, coordinates, like that can help validate our products, like you mentioned, like
Yeah,
looking at the accuracy, and then we can help them and they can help us. So we definitely do encourage those connections.
both those names.
Yeah.
Casey Richards runs the situational awareness and I forgot the rest of the acronym.
Yeah.
Basically, she's the national headquarters, reports to the vice president of disaster logistics
Okay.
and response. And then Greg has been the longtime Esri ArcGIS kind of liaison between the entire
Hmm.
organization. And so I'm sure he probably uses this on the community mapping or whatever else. Does it sound like
Yeah.
you're going away from Esri in terms of repository based on that new model
So
that you have for the portal?
so we'll be hosting the data on the cloud, but it's still the front end is still Esri.
Okay,
So
great.
yeah, we still have, because we know a lot of people use the Esri services. That's why we have the WMS format. It basically works
Yeah.
with things that are not Esri, but we still have the Esri.
But as you move towards 2026 October, it's if you have existing map layers or interfaces that are using the data, is there going to be changes that people need to make and adjust?
So we're moving everything from the old portal to the new portal. So the links, like if you guys are pulling in some data that's, the link could break and you need to pull in the new link, for example, but it will all be there.
Gotcha.
And we're in the middle of that transition now. So the stuff that you see on the portal today should already have the new link. So we're trying to limit the disruption to people, right? So we're trying to keep a lot of the links the same, but the source link of the data might change.
Last question for me, and I'm sorry I'm hogging
Yes.
all the
No, that's
things.
good.
The U.S. Geological Service has obviously mapping towards flood gauges that are pretty established. They don't move around a lot. I'm wondering if you've ever done anything where you've sort of looked to tie that together so that when you know the pass is over the latitude, longitude of the flood gauge, then that data is captured, kind of in a sense providing the before and then after, and then the trigger might be that flood gauge exceeding its whatever peak, or I forgot what they call it, to sort of give you the alert that it's time to go look in the what if did we get the thing after this, or in the next so many days is there going to be a pass for the vegetation analysis, that sort of thing. In other words, where I live, for example, the tree cover, the cloud cover, etc. But at the end of the day, I know where that flood gauge is in my town, and on a 30-meter even basis, I could know to ask for that, and it would be pretty set as to when I would be asking for it. It would be based on the exceeding the high water mark or whatever else it is, kind of a thing, almost like automations.
Yeah, I don't think we have anything like that currently, but you could, look at your gauge again, see if it's above that threshold. You can, to look for the imagery. USGS is a partner with a lot of our satellites, so maybe they have something like that that I'm not aware of.
Great.
But I have to look into that. It's a good idea though, like a way to automatically say, hey, you see that the threshold is getting close, like let's look at it when the satellite's passing. Will we get some data that can help validate that, might be able to see, hey, the floodwaters are high.
Because they sometimes get a 24 to 36 hour advance notice based on the weather forecast. Going to crest over the gauge max or the whatever the level is. So it's not a alarm only kind of a thing. Like after it's happened, it can be a little bit beforehand. Based on also the other thing is there's good old gravity, right? So the while it's raining today in northern New Jersey, it'll be flooding tomorrow in central New Jersey, and that's a given.
So you could take that information and kind of look ahead at satellite overpasses and say, oh, good, like there might be one that's passing. Let's keep an eye on this. The imagery should be available.
Yeah, because what we found, I can tell you from experience, is that communities don't recognize the backwater type flooding into tributaries and so forth. They don't plan for it, and then when it happens, they're surprised by it. And then if it doesn't hit any critical infrastructure, schools, hospitals, etc., they're not looking for it, And meanwhile, residents are just flooded out, their basements and all that, but then there's nobody starting the process for public assistance or damage assessment, etc. And that's when we don't learn about something until a week or two later, and by then mold has crept in and all that kind of fun stuff. So
and I think having the image from the satellite can help double verify, like, hey, the gauge is saying this. I mean, always the gauges are always like the best available information. If you have it, we work with a lot of regions that don't have rain gauges, so the best they can get is coarse satellite resolution data. But having both, like, hey, this says it's going to be flooded,
and there's huge gaps between areas where there are flood gauges either by the state or the national, and where the next one is, and there's a ton of area that can be flooded in between.
And that's why some of the, not just the satellite imagery, but some of the products that we can create from that can say, hey, flood or no flood, or this is standing water, this water is always here, don't worry about it. So that additional analysis can be useful for that as well.
Great. Thank you.
Of course. Are there any other questions? And if not, you guys have my email. I'm happy to support any questions. I think oftentimes people want to look into the portal, play around with some products before they have questions. So that is totally okay as well. And I will share a PDF of these slides so you have all the links. I think the recording will go up as well, so people that could not attend today could view it another time.
Yes, thank you so much, Rachel. We really appreciate it. I
course.
also just wanted to make a quick plug. We are having that second webinar later this month, October 29th. It'll be Building Emergency Management Skills. I will share a registration link and everything like that later today. I'm just working on some editing. Other than that, I hope you all have a great day and thank you again. Oh, yes.
Thank you,
and there's
everyone.
another webinar
Yes.
that Mike dropped in there.
So, and hopefully I see some of you at the national conference.
Yes, I will be there.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm hoping
I'm
to
doing a
attend.
poster.
Awesome. All right. Thank you guys so much.
Okay,
Thanks
thank
again,
you.
Rachel.
Have a great day.
Bye.
Thanks.